stage might explode if I didn't let my body actually fall.
It feels like you're making the inside of the body vibrate, and it can last anything between 12 and 15 minutes. And I thought, I can't keep doing this as I'm getting older. You're constantly striving towards perfection. And that's one of the challenges of learning Tai Chi. The doubt is, it's everything. It's the universe. It's what holds us all together.
Obviously, I've been doing Tai Chi for a while with you, and in that time I've been back and forth to it when I've been available, and in the times I've come I've learned a lot about myself and fitness through it. I remember the first time I went as well, and I seen you and your own physicality and the way you move, and I was like kind of jeweled to the floor dropping watching you do this Tai Chi sequence. And it's definitely changed the way that I go about and the way I move everywhere in life. Like, I very differently think about the way I move and do everything, and within my coaching position, and the way that I kind of stop and think about things a bit more. So I suppose my question based off of that and what I've learned is, how have you found that Tai Chi has affected your day-to-day life, and is there anything in particular that stands out from that?
That's a very good question, because I'm not aware of it having an impact on my day-to-day life, because it's been with me for so long. It probably is my day-to-day life. I can't remember a time when I wasn't doing martial arts. It's scary to think that this year I've been teaching Tai Chi for 30 years.
That's amazing.
So that's a lifetime.
That's incredible.
So the reality is that it's such an essential part of my life. I can no longer recall a life before Tai Chi. What I can remember was when I first saw it, and that blew my socks away. It really did. I'd been aware of Tai Chi as an activity for old people.
Yeah.
And you see these stereotype Hollywood films or television shows, and you have some very old people waving their arms around, not achieving much, and somehow it's supposed to be of magical benefit.
Yeah.
And I could see it's boring, it's slow, it's for old people. And so when I had martial artists recommending I should go and try it, I really wasn't buying into that. But then when I actually saw authentic Tai Chi, Chen style Tai Chi, coming from a martial arts perspective, I couldn't believe the power they were generating. They were sending people flying 6-7 feet. And the same thing that I think you were amazed about was the physicality.
Yeah.
Watching somebody moving what looked like incredibly slowly 1 second, but then with super speed the next, and super power the next, and back to being slow. It takes your breath away, it really does. And doing a high kick, dropping onto the floor into splits, and then jumping back up again. It is very different to any other type of martial art.
What makes it so different from the other martial arts?
Well, a lot of martial arts are, and all martial arts are fantastic, so don't get me wrong. We're all biased towards our own.
Yeah.
But a lot of the martial arts, they can rely on some quite crude activities. So if you want to punch, and if you want to punch harder, and increase the power in a very traditional way. So we think about bigger muscles and swinging a bit faster. But the way the Tai Chi generates the power, because it's a lot of internal power, you're having to learn whole body control. And what on the outside might not look like a big, powerful swinging punch, when you're on the receiving end and you're feeling the power of that punch, you're thinking, oh my God, there's tons of power here. So you are generating power using the entire body. To do that, you have to be relaxed. You can't do it under tension. And this is one of the ironies of using Tai Chi in a real life situation. If you're feeling nervous, you tense up. You can't do that. You have to be relaxed. Then it will work for you.
This is one of the biggest things I've actually taken from Tai Chi for most of my strength training is that I used to be very rigid in everything I did. And then I totally took that away for almost every form of training I started to do. And it changed the way that I experienced a lot of movement for myself. So to be very rigid in movements like the deadlift or the squat. And I try to relax a lot more and focus more on just my breathing and having a more relaxed mindset around things. And it very much changed the way that I experienced a lot of strength training for myself traditionally, and I carried it over to like when we first started rock climbing together, or boulder. And one of the key differences between me and you in terms of style was I was a lot more like slow and flowy, whereas you were more like I'm just going to bomb my way up the wall any way I can. More that like more bit more ballistic.
Yeah, mine's definitely more of a strength and conditioning background of like, yeah, you want to lift this weight up, just use your legs more.
Yeah.
Drive more power, more acceleration.
Yeah.
Just go for it. And yeah, he was a lot more like, I'm going to try and link things nicely. And I was like, why? Just jump for it.
Just jump, just go for it.
But I have seen the pros and cons to both sides. Like,
oh, definitely.
For you, I've seen you struggle on a move, and I've been like, if you just jump for it, you'll get it. And you jump for it and got it.
Yeah.
And then other times, like, I've just been jumping for stuff, and I need to slow down and process what I'm doing a bit more and try and make it look better and flow nicer.
Yeah, there's definitely advantages to both, and that was one of the things I really I loved about the Chen style in particular was that combination of almost like water, where it's like very flowing 1 minute and then it's crushing within like a millisecond, and that amazed me when I first started. It was after COVID actually we started to get the bags on, and I remember you actually doing a 1-inch punch on me with the big body bag on it, and I was like, it's probably going to knock me back like a few centimetres or something, or I don't feel a bit of an oomph in the chest, but I literally pushed me halfway across the hall and landed to it, and I was amazed at and I tried to like prepare and be as ready as I could for it, because you were like, look, be ready for this, because this is gonna be a big push, and it was insane the amount of, and it was just a tiny gap like this, just like, and you were so relaxed, and it just bumped like that, and I was bumped across the room. And it was just remarkable, that kind of combination of like flowing and crushing within one movement, almost like a whip.
A whip is a really good analogy, and it's something we do use a lot. The whole body becomes the whip. So when you want to do a 1-inch punch, you're starting with the feet, and the power then moves from the feet down into the ground and up the legs at the same time. The legs are moving in different directions. We have a spiral, which looks like the yin-yang symbol. And then you can generate the power into the hips, and the hips are rotating. And ironically, if you want to add more power, you put more rotation into the hips. So you could either spin them once, or twice, or 3 times. 3 times would be the maximum amount.
Yeah.
And then you direct that power up through the spine, through the shoulders, and along the arm, and the final thing that moves is the punch, which is it's 1 inch. But it's not just the punch. You've got every single muscle in the body behind it. If you were just trying to use the bicep and the tricep, whatever level of power that is, now add all of your leg power, all of your back, all of the shoulder, and you can add all of that into that 1-inch punch. Can you remember when I did punch you, where the focus of the pain was? Can you recall?
I felt like it was right in the chest and sternum. I felt like my ribcage might explode if I didn't let my body actually fall.
And that's another one of these amazing things. It focuses on the inside. It feels like you're making the inside of the body vibrate rather than an external push. And that, the kind of punch which would knock you backwards, you're feeling quite a different focus there.
Definitely. I've dabbled in quite a few different martial arts. My first introduction as a kid was karate, and then I went to boxing. I've done Tai Chi. I've done a little bit of Wing Chun as well with yourself, and I've been to some other places and tried it as well. I've done a little bit of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I've had a go at some kickboxing and Muay Thai stuff as well. That's it. And just general boxer-size stuff with coaching, but for me, Tai Chi's always been the one that sort of grabbed me a little bit more, especially I like the more philosophical aspects of it as well. For me and my own sort of journey, that's always stuck with me quite a lot. So I suppose thank you for that.
You're welcome. Can you remember how long the sequence seemed to last the first time you saw it?
It was about 15 minutes, if I remember.
So if you've come from a different style where you've done a form or a kata, which might last a couple of minutes,
Yeah.
suddenly seeing this form, which does go on quite a bit. There are 74 sections to this thing.
Yeah.
And it can last anything between 12 and 15 minutes. That's a lot to learn. And that's one of the challenges of learning Tai Chi. If you want to go and learn a martial art and be competent within a few weeks or a few months at the most, you would find Tai Chi quite a challenge.
Yeah.
You need to be committed for the long term, and then you can get the benefits. But as with everything else we do in the gym, the person who is consistent and is doing that every day over months turning into years will see a real result. And we see that in the gym all the time. Somebody will come for a few weeks and they'll be working so hard, and then they lose interest, and then you don't see them again until next new year.
Yeah.
And then they start again, and they're forever wondering why they can't make any progress. With something as complicated as Tai Chi, and it is complicated, you have to be consistent, constantly and consistently working towards developing it.
So with Tai Chi then, is it similar to other martial arts with like grading systems and belts, or how do you like progress? Is there any sort of almost like something that's written down that's like a step by step how you know you're progressing, or is it just a sort of almost formless sort of martial art?
It's very Taoist. You look inside yourself and decide, are you improving? If you need a belt or a certificate to prove that you're improving, then you're missing a trick there. So it's very self-reflective. You're constantly striving towards perfection. And in a traditional Chinese martial art, there weren't any belts. That came through from Japan. Now, quite a few Chinese martial arts have realised you can make a lot of money out of belts and gradings. And so, if you have a grading once every 3 months and you charge people however much money, you can earn a hell of a lot of money. But in your traditional Chinese martial arts, no. You would be constantly striving towards perfection. So if you think about Kung Fu, Gong Fu, it means work towards perfection. Do we ever reach perfection?
No.
No. But we're constantly striving. So no, there isn't a system of belts. You have teacher, you do have master. So in a lot of these schools, you would have a master. I think teacher is a much better term, or coach is a better term, because by the very nature, a master is in danger of keeping people below their level. But a coach or a teacher would want them to be better than they are. So we would be, especially in our school, would be pushing people as much as we can to improve at whatever rate they can.
Yeah. How would you then differentiate between like a beginner and someone that's been practicing for like a few years?
You can see as soon as they're in the classroom how well do they move. And if you watch any of these fake martial artists on YouTube, and now and again I'll see somebody pretending to do Tai Chi, you can immediately see there's no substance. All of the moves in Tai Chi come from the centre of the body. We're looking for good alignment of the spine and relaxed form. And it's very easy to make fun of Tai Chi and Kung Fu and just wave your arms around.
Yeah.
But you can see there's absolutely nothing there. When you look at somebody who's accomplished, that they move with a purpose that is instantly visible, because you can see it coming from the centre of the body, and it's not the shape of the arms. That's just an added extra. And then there's also the ability to use it, because we do use it. We do all the applications, as you know.
Yeah.
So you're not just waving your arms around because it looks pretty. There's a reason. Everyone is either a block or a strike, or much more painfully, something called chin na. Chin na is seizing control. So you make contact with somebody, and then you would be seizing their arm, or their wrist, or their neck, or their fingers, and then you put full control on. And when we start doing this, it looks a bit more like something like jiu-jitsu or aikido, where you've got these wrist locks on and finger locks on. And then we'll do pushing hands, which starts off really gently, and we're helping each other with posture and balance. And then once you get the hang of it, it can look a lot more like Mongolian wrestling.
Yeah.
Because you're trying to just push people onto the floor or trip them up or send them.
It's almost like with pushing hands, that when I look on it now, it's a little bit like a python or a snake, where you just be moving very gently and then suddenly something snaps like a snake strikes. And you've gone from being in this position where you're just moving around very gently to each other to you've suddenly had your arm twisted behind you in a position where you feel like a joint's about to snap, like you've gone something that feels very much like a submission hold in jiu-jitsu, or you've literally just been flipped over on the floor and you can't even comprehend what's happened if it's happened that well. You're just lying there in confusion with your arm and agony and you're like, what the hell has just happened to my body? Like you're seizing control, you literally feel like the control of your own body's been taken away from you.
And when done correctly, there's no permanent damage. You put the lock on and your partner taps out and then you release. So there shouldn't be pain the next day from that, if done properly. Now, if you're in a life and death situation, then you keep putting the pressure on, and yes, you would cause a lot of damage.
Ever walked away from one of the classes with any like permanent injuries or anything? Or aches. The only thing that's ever ached has been my knees when I started, from just not having the right strength and the full range of motion from dropping those low positions. And I remember the time when I first started as well, I had a bit of a quad dominancy, so my quads tended to put a lot of pressure from my knee joint. My hamstrings were a bit atrophied in comparison. I remember when a physio about it, I felt like my knee was going out of place and it had moved in some really awkward ways sometimes around the socket, and I would find then when I came to Tai Chi, it would reveal that weakness to me quite a lot, especially when we were dropping into very low positions, doing things like the whip or doing the sort of 1-inch punch strikes from that slow low position. I would go to do it and I would feel as I drew that sort of nice whipping shape that my knee would almost be like bump and it would wobble out of place. There was like a deficiency there, and that helped me identify that quite a lot.
One of the other surprising benefits is just how much of a leg workout it is. Now, if I said to you, okay, can you do a squat for me? Right, good. Now go down into your lowest position. Good. And now just stay there for an hour, please. Of course, 2 minutes in, your legs turn to jelly and you'd start crying, okay? Now, when you're doing the Tai Chi practice, you are forever up and down in a squatting position, and you're doing it on one leg, then the other leg, and in slightly different positions. So you're moving the muscles around to just alleviate that pressure. But I tell you what, after an hour or 2 hour or 3 hour classes, which is what we do, the next morning, what should be hurting, it would be the delayed onset muscle soreness, because it's a hell of a workout, and people are often surprised by that. I think people are surprised by lots of things about authentic Tai Chi, and you can find different versions of Tai Chi much easier in Wales, where people have been on a weekend course or whatever and learned a few basic very basic movements, and have been told, right, now you can do a Tai Chi class. Yeah, that's wonderful, but it's not the genuine form, it's not the authentic form, which is Tai Chi as a martial art.
Yeah. What got you into Tai Chi as a martial art, and did you do any others before?
So I was already a black belt in Kung Fu, something called Xinyi Kung Fu, and I'd been doing that since I was at school. And I just lived for my martial arts. I had been in Spain as a child, and I'd seen the Bruce Lee film Enter the Dragon, and it just blew my mind. And I had no warning this was coming on. We were in an open air bar, and it was on the cinema screen. And unlike the UK version at the time, which was very heavily edited to take out all the violent scenes. This was the full X-rated film, which I watched, and it just absolutely blew my mind. So I'd always had that in the back of my mind. I wanted to learn Kung Fu. And then I was very lucky then to find a Kung Fu teacher, and I just trained with him as much as I could. So I think it was 3 or 4 nights a week just training, and I worked my way through. Now, they did have grading and belts for the reasons I mentioned earlier, and I was so chuffed to work my way up and get graded, and I was so proud of my black sash, as they called it. And then I just finished my degree at university, and they were looking for English teachers to go to China. Now, I did not want to be an English teacher. It hadn't occurred to me, but I did want to go to China to study Kung Fu. And I said, yes, I can do that. So I applied, and I got the job. And I was teaching in a place called Taiyuan in Shanxi province. This is in 1992. And so I had already been teaching the Kung Fu as an instructor, so now I could go off to China and develop that knowledge a lot more. But when I arrived there, I couldn't get into a Kung Fu school. It was Wushu, which was more of an Olympic style martial art, and if you didn't start training at the age of 5, you can really forget it. You need to be able to jump somersaults and land on concrete on your back.
Yeah.
And they'd be training in these schools for years and years. And I just wasn't of that standard. And that's when they said, go and try the Tai Chi. So I as I mentioned earlier, I thought, no thank you, but I'll be polite, I would go along. So I went with them in the park very early and met the teacher. And I said, could I train? And he said, no, thank you. And so I stayed and I watched. And at the end, I said to him, can I come and train? And he said, okay, come tomorrow. And he wasn't in the least bit interested in showing a foreigner Tai Chi. So he said, come tomorrow at whatever time. And I was there. And I was there early. And I was there every single day. So reluctantly, he started to teach. And I think because I was so dedicated, he liked that, and I was there constantly training every single day, and every morning for at least 2 hours before we started work, and then on Sunday for another 3 or 4 hours. And I became so immersed in it. That's all I was doing. That was the main reason for being there. So I could very quickly then, because we're doing it so much, learn the weapon form. So we had to do a stick form and a sword form, and then do all the fighting aspects and the pushing hands and the sticking hands. And I just ate it up. Now it really did help. I'd had a few years of a much more basic Kung Fu, so I already knew how to do the kicks and stuff. But the demands on the flexibility were a hell of a lot more doing that. And I just haven't stopped since. So then when I came back to the UK, in the absence of having a teacher, I started teaching myself. And that was 30 years ago.
That's incredible. That's quite a journey, like going there, meeting this guy, like essentially in the park, and then being like, oh, can you teach me? Oh, no, I'm not going to teach you. To then, 30 years later, being a Tai Chi instructor yourself. Like, that is just quite an incredible way to do it, because most people would have heard that no and been like, oh, okay, right, that's that, I'm off, go do something else now. But you sort of stuck around, waited till the end again, watched it all, and then was like, no, can I do it? And he's like, fine, just come. And now it's like you're turning up every morning, like you're saying, you're showing that dedication, when most people would have just turned away. And I think that's what really let him be that sort of mentor for you. And I think that's something that a lot of people need in life in general, is don't just take no for the answer. Ask, okay, didn't happen, right, try again. Okay, it's not quite happening yet, keep showing up every single day, and eventually something will come of it. And I think it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's martial arts, starting a business or a podcast or anything like that. If you just show up consistently, that's when the opportunities arise, sort of thing.
Absolutely, and that is the essence of the Gong Fu and Tai Chi.
Yeah.
You have to just every day keep at it. And it's so easy to think, oh, I can't be bothered, I'll try something new. Or think, if I pay a load of money, I can master this in 6 weeks. No, it's not going to happen. It's an everyday commitment, month after month, year after year.
Yeah. I think this is something that I definitely saw in when I was trying a few different martial arts, because I used to be training for the stunt register, and one of the requirements was you have to be a black belt in a martial arts, and it has to be a registered one for the stunt register, so you couldn't just go and do whichever one you wanted. And I was trying all these different martial arts, and when I was looking at how everyone else that was getting on the stunt register was doing it, they'd basically just pay for like private lessons for a year and then have a black belt. And I was like, how can you be a black belt at martial arts in the space of a year? Like, no matter how much you're training, like, that just didn't seem feasible to me. And, like, that should be a thing. Just because you've got more money, you can afford private lessons, and you're just being like, oh, yeah, here's an extra bit of money for my next belt. Here's my next bit of money. Because, like, some of the systems I saw, there was, like, 10 belts they had to go through before black. So they're doing like a grading once a month. And
I'm not being funny, but if you're not watching an 80s Kung Fu movie or something where someone starts like, literally Karate Kid, it's like by the time he gets to the competition, the All Valley, he's got a black belt on. And I'm like, what? What? It's crazy. It's like that was it.
Yeah, I just don't get it. Like, how can you just progress that quickly at a martial art, and then in a year, like, I've been doing sports for years, and I haven't mastered it. That's like me getting into rock climbing today and going from climbing like a 5 to like a 9.
Yeah.
It's like, there's no way that's physically possible. You can't learn all the techniques and all like the intricate details in that space of time. And then I eventually went to a taekwondo class, and they were like, oh, do you want to learn how to do competitions, or do you want to learn how to do taekwondo? Most of the people that went there did competitions. They were a very well-known competition school. And I was like, oh no, I want to do taekwondo. I don't want to do competition stuff. I want to actually learn how to do taekwondo. And then they were like, right, there's a bag over there. Kick it 100 times with your left leg, kick it 100 times with your right leg, then come back to me. It took me like half hour. I was dying afterwards. I was like, right, I've done that. What next? It was like, okay, I'm going to come and watch you do one kick on each leg. I did one on each leg. He corrected it. He was like, now do it 100 times more on each leg so you don't make that mistake again. And then come back to me afterwards, and I'd just keep doing the same kick, and I'd go back and it'd be like, right, cool, fix that little thing, go back. And this went on for months, and I was just doing like this one kick. And then he was like, yeah, that's looking better now. Shall we learn a different kick after like 3-4 months? And I was like, oh, well, this is going to be a long journey, isn't it?
It's literally the Bruce Lee quote. You know, not the man who's practiced 1,000 different kicks, but the one kick 1,000 times. That's literally that.
Yeah.
I love that.
But that's how you learn the intricacies of a martial art, is you practice it.
Yeah.
You have one thing to focus on to fix it a bit, and then you practice it more, and then you do it again and again and again, day after day. So, like, those people that are learning the whole syllabus of a martial art in a year,
That's crazy.
It's not on.
Sorry, you were saying? That's one thing in particular I really liked about Tai Chi compared to other martial arts I'd tried, and in general, a lot of forms of like education and teaching I've been through, is that there wasn't that grade and there wasn't that belt system or learning to get through this or get through that. It was that you are just learning it as it is for what it is, out of your own interest of what you're getting out of it. And that's one thing I've always studied with, struggled with my own education throughout life, was I didn't like being taught to be just how to pass the test. And I remember one of the teachers that had a really big impact on me was one of my English teachers called Mrs. Havgar, and she just wanted me to be interested in English and literature and reading. She didn't really push me to be like, you have to pass this test and get this grade. She just encouraged me to be interested in it and that had exactly the effect of making me get the desired grades, because I went on my own journey for it instead. And I found that with Tai Chi a lot more, is I found myself spending a lot more time outside of class actually reading up on Taoism and looking at the movements and playing around with how my own body works in my spare time, especially within my strength coaching as well. I introduce a lot of my own kind of like a hybridization of some of the movements I've learned from Tai Chi into the way I move, and then also into things like the way I warm up and activate people and cool down at the end. Is I'll introduce little elements I've picked up here and there, and the things that I've really gone out my own way to go and experience and try and learn for myself. Whereas I wouldn't have had that if I was just, for me anyway, if I was just pushing to try to get a belt. I know for me that wouldn't happen.
It's very true. If you think who your sternest judge should be, it should be yourself. And if you've paid in some school to get a black belt, and you know that you've paid them so much money in 12 months, you'll be forever self-doubting. You know the value of it, or the lack of value of that. So a much better way is to be consistently looking inside and thinking, am I able to do this thing? Do I know whether it has genuine quality or not? And you are your own best judge and your own strictest judge.
I love that. That's definitely something I know rings true for me, and I think that's something that rings true for you.
Yeah.
You're definitely your own biggest critic.
It's something that I try and take into my coaching with my gymnastics. Is I always tell my gymnasts before a competition, I don't care how you place in the competition. If you win the competition and you haven't shown me your best performance and shown me that you've tried hard enough, and I know you haven't tried hard in training and like following that sort of like train of thought, then I'm not going to be happy as your coach, because I know you haven't given it all, you haven't tried. Whereas if you've turned up every single session, tried your absolute best, and you've turned up to the comp and come last, I'll be over the moon with you. And I try and take that to them and try and teach them that that's how they should be, and not looking at this external result of did I win, did I lose, because they can't control the externals of how well everyone else is doing. All they can control is how well they've been doing, and they're the only person that can judge how much effort they've put in at the end of the day. That's what I try to stick by.
Yeah.
There's a few other characteristics of Tai Chi which are very useful, because you can transfer them to other sports and other parts of your life. One is the breathing. So Tai Chi has been described as a moving meditation. I don't know if I ever mentioned that to you.
Yeah, definitely, and there's definitely something I experience a lot in class.
And for a lot of people, me included, if ever I try to sit still and meditate, I can't do that. My brain is all over the place. But when I'm doing Tai Chi, I get a calmness, a stillness inside. And it starts with the breathing. You slow the breathing right down. So you are, before we're starting, we're maximising the amount of oxygen in the system and slowing everything down. Suddenly you can think clearly. You can focus on what you're doing. And that's something you can transfer to whatever is happening. And I tell my college students, before exams or interviews, these are the kind of exercises to be trying. The other thing which is really useful with Tai Chi, especially as people are getting older, their bodies just cannot cope with the ballistic training. It causes too much damage, and younger people can have enough time to recover between the next session. As you get older, you just don't have that, and you can have people training on injuries and compounding the injuries. And I've noticed, and I do the Force gym 3-4 times a week, and I do the blood, sweat and tyres there, and I've noticed how I'm using much more of a controlled approach to every exercise, so using a calisthenic type, and the same way that I'd be doing the Tai Chi. So I know I'm not knocking my joints out of.
I noticed this a lot because I'd come and do a lot of photography on Blood, Sweat and Tires, and there'd be like 80 odd people in the room, and everyone's just smashing away as hard as they could, and then come over to you. Part of it because I knew you, so I didn't feel like a creep following around the gym with a camera, and you would always be doing your own sort of alternative to the demonstrated movement. It would still be the same movement, but you would perform it in a different style, and it was very slow and controlled. Like I remember the wall sits, for example, you would just do horse riding stances and hold a play out in front of you, and it was amazing. Or I remember there was like a plank station before, and you just hopped on the pull-up bar and just held like a reverse plank sort of position instead, just like an inverted planche for like 30 seconds. It's amazing.
Yeah, my daughter says I do tend to show off in the gym as well. So, but yeah, it's exactly how I do that, and it's because I have had injuries in the gym. I've injured myself trying to do too many movements. I can remember trying to get 20 pull-ups in 30 seconds, and I could do it. My elbows took forever to recover, and I thought I can't keep doing this as I'm getting older. I need to be training cleverer, not cruder. And so what do I look to? I look to the Tai Chi. And the Tai Chi had been designed by martial artists who were getting too old to carry on doing what they'd been doing when they were younger. So they thought, let's just slow it down. And out of that, they found all of these other benefits. They found the relaxation, the way they could help their homeostasis. They could look at their internal health and their psychological health, and carry on training until the day they died.
But when I'm training for an event, I very much notice this contrast in my training where it's very, it's a lot more that joint knocking kind of training. Obviously, I'm a lot younger, so I recognise from the sports science aspect as well some of those benefits of actually trying to load and put more shock on the system while I'm younger to try and get that bone density there before I hit 35, so I can have my bones in the best positions possible. But I noticed that massive contrast in training of when I finish training for the current event I'm training for now, I know I'll be going to a lot more slow, controlled movement training again, and I can just feel that difference in my joints where they feel so smooth and flowy and well lubricated versus when I'm training for something like I am now. I'm like redoing the hammerthon. I can feel that everything just feels more crunchy and rigid, and it just does not flow as well as it used to. It doesn't feel as smooth, and it doesn't feel like it's going to last that way the way it is either.
So you've mentioned Taoist philosophy.
Yes.
For Tai Chi. Could you talk us through a bit of Taoism? Give like an overview for the listeners that might not be familiar with it.
Well, I must say I have a very amateurish understanding. Okay, so it's a religion, but not a religion. They do believe in gods and deities, but it has a long tradition in China and would have been in parallel lines to Buddhism. So you'd have had the temples and the monasteries where people would have been worshipping. The Tao, if you look at the yin-yang symbol, so you're moving from black and white, hard and soft, that is the Tao. Together, that's the Tao, and the Tao is it's everything. It's the universe. It's what holds us all together. And whenever I explain this, I keep saying, "Have you seen Star Wars?" And they start talking about the Force. It's that kind of idea that there's a universal force holding people together. Now, I must apologise to anybody out there who's knows a hell of a lot more about it than I do. My understanding is quite limited to that in very broad strokes. It's really useful though when we look at yin yang symbol for Tai Chi, because we're moving between soft and hard, slow and quick, and that's the essence of the Tai Chi. So we're constantly in a spiral. This is called silk reeling, in the way that the silkworm would wrap its silk around to make a cocoon, and you want the body to have that silk reeling move, and it's drawing upon these opposite forces. Why? Because then you can express these out with maximum force when you need to do that. At the same time, if you are on the receiving end of a force, you need to make sure you don't meet force with force. You need to meet force with nothing, with emptiness. So if somebody's trying to hit you, you need to be moving out of the way and then striking them back where they are at their weakest.
Definitely experienced this in Chinya quite a lot, where I go to put a push on you and you've read it just right, as you always do, and I end up on the floor. But in the broader sense as well with Taoism, I've always seen it as having this very dualism sort of nature to it, and it reminds me a lot of, in terms of psychology, where I come back to Carl Jung and the idea of the shadow self, and this idea, as you said, of when the two get married together, it becomes more powerful. That idea of taking your positive or more traditionally positive attributes and part of yourself, and that more, or would see the negative or the more shadow side of yourself, and learning how to help them sort of flow together in one. And when that all works, that expression of yourself is more real, more true, more natural, and more powerful. And I found that for me, Taoism has always helped me deal with that and come back to that. But then I see the practical applications in Tai Chi mirroring the more philosophical side. Is like, it's very clear in Tai Chi, those movements are, and the sort of mirroring of the philosophy and the movements, I seem to find that's a lot more accessible for me to understand compared to some other martial arts.
That's very true, and also then you can use that for the rest of your life, that you want to have a holistic approach to your life. So yes, you need to be doing your training, but you also need to be working, and you need to have a family. You need to be balancing all of these different things. I'm sure we all know of people that have just gone down one track only, and that becomes their only thing in life, and it never seems to have a successful end. So you're looking at a more holistic approach to living your life, and I find that incredibly useful because it's helped me constantly balance my day job with my martial arts training, with family, and anything else I want to do in life.
Yeah. What are the other sort of benefits that you wouldn't expect to get from Tai Chi and Taoism then? Because we've spoke about like using it to balance your life in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
We've spoken about the obvious ones, which is it's going to improve your flexibility, you're going to get fitter, you're doing like an exercise essentially, so you're going to get stronger, build your leg muscles, things like that. What are the sort of hidden benefits you'd get from it?
Well, in the last few years we've had a lot more awareness of mental health, and I've always felt ahead of the curve there because Tai Chi has empowered its practitioners with the ability to look after their mental health. And there's a really interesting move at the start of the Tai Chi sequence, and it's called Wu Wei. Wu Wei, and it means active nothingness. And like all of these things, it sounds very contradictory. So more nothingness by itself is not something we're after. That suggests you're just going to sit on the sofa and do nothing. Active nothingness is having that state of mind where you are saying, okay, I will now empty my mind. I will still all of the chatter and the stress and the worries and the things I need to do today, and at this moment in time my mind will be completely still. And you need that to do your Tai Chi. So before we do any movement, you're standing completely still, you're slowing your breathing down, and you are using the brain to have this active nothingness. That is something you can then transfer to other parts of your life as well.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because I spent a bit of time with probably like a few weeks, a month ago, over the past sort of few weeks, and months, I'd say, then looking at different alternative forms of meditation, because I know obviously with the meditation there's the classic sitting style, but within that there's so many different branches and schools of thoughts, like the candle kind of staring and then listen to sounds, and I've been for the different apps over the years, and I spent a bit more time looking at different styles of meditation when I started talking about it with my partner. And I sort of sat back and realised that when I started looking at the list of different meditation styles, mine had actually fallen more into that sort of Taoism style of it, where it was actively trying to quieten the mind instead of just sitting there passively watching the mind, which is what I tried before and found wasn't helpful, because I always found that I was trying to quieten my mind, and then once it was quiet I would just sit there and observe from that quiet place, but then I'd want to do something with that, I'd find. And I naturally did this in Tai Chi at the beginning. I would be like quiet in the mind, just focus on this now. And I found that for me has always been the more beneficial one for myself and what I've enjoyed. But I'd never realised all the time I'd been doing it that it actually fell under that category, or that it was part of Tai Chi is where I'd first sort of noticed it more, but it'd always been the one that would work for me more. And it's always been Tai Chi.
So you said about you work in a college.
I do, yes.
And you teach Tai Chi there.
I do.
What else do you sort of cover there? So you mentioned that you're an English teacher,
yes.
Before the podcast, you started telling me about this college, and it just sounds like the perfect college to go to.
It's the X-Men Academy or something.
Yeah.
It was set up by a German educationalist, Kurt Hahn, and he set up Gordonston School and the Duke of Edinburgh scheme. And he then wanted to have an international school that would allow people from all over the world to come together and share challenges, and in that coming together help with world peace. So he's a German. He fled Germany when the Nazis were in power. He had to get out of there. One of his students was Prince Philip, and he had to get out as well. And so then they set up Gordonston, and Gordonston was a very successful private school, a public school. So they were using that as a model for a school, but rather than for UK people, they wanted international people. So they found a 12th century castle looking over the sea. It's perched up on the cliffs, and it's in an estate, and this was given to them to start the school, and it's their 60th anniversary this year.
Oh, wow.
So we were the first school in the world to do the International Baccalaureate, which is a very respected international qualification. And most of the international schools around the world use the IB. Our students are residential. They live with us for 2 years, and then they go off to university. People who don't know about us assume it's a place for wealthy students, and that is just so untrue. Yes, we have some very wealthy people, and quite a few members of various royal families from Europe have...
Oh yeah, I used to work in the Italian restaurant they all came, and I had the pleasure of serving the Princess of Belgium and Margaret pizza, not once, but twice.
Yeah, we've become quite popular with various princesses.
Yeah.
But that's what you'd see in the newspaper. The reality is 2/3 of our students are there on scholarships, or they are sponsored, and you have some amazing people who are refugees out of Tibet or Syria or various conflict zones. We have girls coming from Afghanistan who there's no way they could go to school in Afghanistan. We had do you remember when Malala got shot in the head in Pakistan for trying to go to school? Well, there were 2 other girls who were also shot in that same attack, and they came and they schooled with us. And these are much more typical of the students that we have. So we have this international awareness, and we are very active then in helping these young people return to their home countries and challenge all the things that are going wrong with the planet today. We also like to do a lot of outdoor education, which is where I got into it. Because we're next to the sea, we can use the sea, and I also like to take students up into the mountains. So every Tuesday afternoon I'll be doing something fun. It could be gorge scrambling or climbing or a bit of kayaking or going off to the climbing wall, something like that. I run a Tai Chi self-defense activity as well. My main job though is I'm an English teacher, so I teach from 8 o'clock in the morning until 1 o'clock 5 days a week, and then I can do all the fun stuff on an afternoon.
That is just sounds like the best place ever. I wish I could go there, but I'm a bit old now.
I don't care if I'm too old. I want to go back to go through that.
But I feel like that's a lot of the stuff that is missing in mainstream education, because obviously you've got the education side, which is important. I always do say it's important to be educated, but then it's missing out on all the other stuff like the outdoor activities, and doing things out in nature and different activities to realise what you're interested in, learn about your health, your mental well-being, all of that stuff, but then also learn how to function as part of a group and stuff. And that's things that you don't really get in school. You might do some team sports, but that's about the extent of it. Is I'm going to play for we're in Wales, so the rugby team, or I'm from England, so it was the football team. And that's as far as it goes, whereas this sort of takes it to that next level in my view.
We don't really have a culture of rugby teams or football teams. We do sporadically, we get teams together, but we're not making that a major part of the college experience. But we have a lot of very creative activities going on, and these are all student led. So they have various rock bands or orchestral bands, or they'll put on performances. So you have various choirs going on. Some incredible artists. We have a recording studio, so they can go in, those who are able to do so, and record original music. We have a theatre that they can then put on their own performances there, as well as those who want to go off and do the more physical outdoor stuff. We also really push for them to be passionate about what's happening in the world, whether it's environmental or the way different genders or people of different orientations are treated around the world, and actively do stuff to address that. So it's the kind of place that you just be swept up in the passion of the people.
Yeah, it definitely seems like it's missing what a lot of education is of. Mm-hmm. We're preparing you for the wider world.
Yes.
This is what's happening in the world. You now have that awareness. Because without an awareness, you can't do anything to change it. And it's given them, it seems, the tools to actually have that thinking and thought process of, right, what can I do that's going to impact others, rather than this is what you need for a test.
That's right. And another big difference, and I forget because I've been there for 13 years now, but when people walk in, they would assume that all these students would be wearing full uniform, and nothing could be further from the truth. And everybody is known by their first name. There's no sir and miss like you'd have in schools. So everybody, including the head, would be called by their first name, and that changes the dynamics significantly as well.
I like that. Yeah, I really like that. That's cause I've lived around Landsford my whole life, and I've obviously met a lot of these students who've come through the restaurant that I used to work in the Italian, because it was a Meat Free Monday, and all of them were like, we want our meat, so they'd come to the pizzeria, the Italian restaurant to come for their meat, and then have a margherita pizza. But they would just go out and have this sort of night out and land to it where they would get together and have a meal, and I would meet loads of them, and there was so many different fascinating characters, but there was always this stigma in Atlanta about Atlanta College of there's just royal family kids, they're just entitled and all that, and I'd never really heard that much about it before in terms, so it seemed very secretive, like it was a little hidden X-Men house in the middle of St. Donat's, but I didn't really understand that was the philosophy behind it, and that was the thought process about sort of empowering people to go out and change the world, and I love that about it.
And that's the mission statement of the college, education is a force for change. Well, where do we start? We start that in education.
Wow.
So, thinking about everything that you've been through and everything we've spoken about today, what is the one biggest piece of advice you would give to the listeners?
Be persistent and consistent. Whatever it is you're trying to do, whether it's learning a musical instrument or a skill or studying for an exam, it's a challenge. The reason you're doing it is it's a challenge. It's not going to be easy. If it was easy, there'd be no point in doing it. But if you are persistent and consistent, you can achieve whatever you want to achieve.
Amazing. Well, thank you for coming on. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Is there anywhere where people can find you online, say they want to go for Tai Chi lessons, things like that? Where should they go?
The school is called Vale Dragon Tai Chi. We have a website. I don't know if you can put the website on the podcast.
Yeah, we'll link the website.
And we have classes in Lantwick Major and Colwinston. That's on a Wednesday and a Thursday. The classes on a Wednesday, the first hour is for beginners, but anybody can come. But I can focus on beginners for the first hour. The second hour is more advanced, so then I'll help the students who've been there for a while and also teach the weapon forms. So they have a sword form and a stick form. And then the last hour is the self-defense, the chinna, the applications, and people can either come for the first hour, the second hour, the third hour, or stay for all three. On a Thursday, it's more of a general class, and it's just 1 hour on a Thursday. But I do stay behind because a very good friend of mine, then he comes along and he teaches 2 hours of Wing Chun Kung Fu, which is a different style of Kung Fu. So I stay behind and I do his class with him as well. That's in Colwinston on a Thursday night.
Cool. Well, we'll make sure we get that linked in the podcast for you, and hopefully
so much.
Someone will pop along to the classes and experience what we've been talking about today.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Adventure Athletes podcast. If you like this episode, make sure you follow us on Instagram, Spotify and YouTube and share our content around. It helps more than you can ever imagine. Now, if there's a person in particular that you want to hear from or a topic that you want us to cover, just drop us a message, let us know in our DMs, and we'll make sure we try and reach out to the relevant people to cover that topic for you. We're always trying to make content that you guys want to listen to. We have just dropped our website. It's adventureathletes.co.uk, and you can go on there to find out the range of different services we offer. So we have sports massage, different training programs, and personal training, both online and in person, that you can sign up to on the website. So make sure you go and check us out at adventureathletes.co.uk.